Hey everybody out there in YouTube land, Facebook land, and everything in between. This is Jay coming to you again. As most of you know, I'm a political junkie for real, to the core, through and through. Have been since about 1985 or 86. Actually 87, when I campaigned for Jesse Jackson right out of high school. Been at this ever since, at various levels. I think from now until election time next year in 2012, I'm going to post a video every week or two having to do with something related to politics today. Not necessarily the history of politics or the history of the candidates or anything like that, but something related to contemporary politics in America. This week I want to talk a little bit about the Electoral College and the actual electoral process that we go through in getting somebody from a nobody to President of the United States. As many of you know, there are two phases of any presidential election. The first is when we all go out to vote. That would be the Tuesday after the first Monday in November every 4 years. Our next election will be in November of 2012. I believe the date is actually the 4th of November again. I'm not positive about that, so don't mark your calendars if I'm wrong. But after that, then delegates are sent, or electors, are sent to the Electoral College to cast the binding vote that actually takes that person from candidate to President of the United States and puts them in office in the White House. One of the real hot topics this election cycle is whether or not the Electoral College process is fair and if it's needed anymore. As you may know from your American history classes back in high school or college, the Electoral College was set up under Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution by the forefathers. This was done because they didn't trust Congress to select a president or a leader of our country, since they didn't even know what they were going to call that individual then. And they also didn't trust the people to make the right decision. So they came up with kind of a hybrid of the two, and decided that each state would have a number of electors that equaled the number of senators, which every state has two, and the number of representatives. The number of representatives a state has varies based on population. The state with the highest number of Electoral College votes is California, which has 55, and then they go from 55 all the way down to 3, which is the least that any state can have, with 2 senators and 1 representative. It's kind of frightening to think that California totally smashes the 6 states and the District of Columbia, all which have 3 electors in the Electoral College. Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Alaska, Wyoming, Vermont, and the District of Columbia only have 3 representatives in the Electoral College. Kind of interesting. There are arguments both for and against the Electoral College, and there always have been since the beginning. This election cycle, it is a really contentious issue. And it's really splitting up the votes, even within the individual parties, the Democrats, the Republicans, and the Tea Partiers. Nobody can really agree on whether or not the Electoral College is a needed thing anymore. I want to kind of give you a little bit of education, quote-unquote, about the Electoral College. There are a total of 538 electors. 535 of them represent the total number of state senators and representatives in our Congress, and the additional 3 go to the District of Columbia, which has no representation in Congress, which is kind of funny since they are our nation's capital, yet they have no representation in Congress, and they're taxed. So much for taxation without representation being thrown to the wind, huh? Anyway, one of the primary arguments against the Electoral College is that several times in our nation's history, the Electoral College has not reflected the popular vote of the nation. Most recently, in the year 2000, Al Gore received 50,992,000 votes, counting individual votes, the whole one vote, one person analogy, while George W. Bush received only 50,455,000. As you all will recall, Florida cast a deciding vote in the Electoral College, casting all of their votes, which gave George W. Bush the necessary 271 votes to carry him into the White House. People were extremely frustrated about that. It's important to realize that that is not the first time this has happened. In 1824, John Quincy Adams received more than 38,000 fewer votes than Andrew Jackson, but guess who became president? Yep, Andrew Jackson. In 1876, Rutherford B. Hayes, won in the Electoral College, but not the popular vote. And in 1888, Benjamin Harrison lost the popular vote by 96,000 votes to Grover Cleveland. However, he won the Electoral College vote by 65, just based upon the way that the electors in the Electoral College cast their final votes. So as you can see, there have been several instances in the history of the presidency where the man occupying that office did not carry the popular vote. But again, that's one of the primary arguments against the Electoral College. One of the primary arguments in favor of it is the fact that it distributes the votes across the country, still based on population, but a little more evenly than just the popular vote. What I mean by that is that, I'll give you a very basic example. The state of Wyoming has 500,000 people total in it. The city of New York has 8.5 million people. If we go strictly on popular vote, one person, we end up with New York City canceling out most of the Midwest. The populations of North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin don't equal the population of New York City. So all of those state votes in the Midwest are just completely stomped on. And the question becomes, how do those people in Wyoming and Idaho and the Dakotas get their voices heard in Washington, D.C.? Something to think about. Another reason they don't want to do away with the Electoral College is the presidential primaries. Right now, small states like Vermont and Iowa, which are in the bottom 10 as far as population, get a huge amount of money generated or revenue generated during presidential primaries because they have the first primary and the first caucus in the country. Carries a huge amount of weight. Kind of gives an indication to the rest of the country how the small guys are feeling about their candidates, both Republican, Democrats, and independents or Tea Party folks. If you take away the Electoral College and you're going on strictly one vote per person, those smaller states completely lose any standing whatsoever in the presidential primary process because no one's going to spend time, money, or energy campaigning in Wyoming or Iowa when cities like New York City, Miami, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Dallas, Fort Worth, Kansas City, etc. completely cancel out their votes. Why would you spend millions of dollars campaigning in Iowa if you could spend the same amount of money in New York City and know that you're going to come out ahead? Because that city is going to carry more than 6 or 7 states combined in the Midwest. The Electoral College kind of helps to balance that out a little bit by spreading those votes out and ensuring that small states like Wyoming, the Dakotas, and Iowa do in fact have their voices heard at the national elections. So as these phone calls start coming, as they undoubtedly will, they've actually already started in Iowa and Vermont, New Hampshire also, asking you to oppose the Electoral College or to support it. Really think about the pros and cons of this. It's really, really interesting when you start thinking about pros and cons. People that are against the Electoral College say the possibility of electing a minority president, i.e. somebody who doesn't win the popular vote, is a huge hanging point. There's a risk of so-called faithless electors. And what that essentially means, and I'm sure that you'll hear about this in the nightly news in the near future, because it was in some talking points that I looked at earlier this weekend. Faithless electors, what they are the individuals who the state send as electors to the Electoral College. There is no law, state or federal, that says that an elector is bound by what they pledge to when they're still in their state. Once they enter the Electoral College to cast their binding vote, they are absolutely permitted to change. And that has happened several times. Not a good scene. Imagine being a voter in any state and believing that your elector was going to go cast the will of the people of their state, and then for whatever reason, through politicking on the floor of the Electoral College, etc., completely change up their vote and vote for a different candidate. Another thing is that many people think that the Electoral College really does repress the popular vote and keeps people from going to the polls. Their logic is that because their vote isn't really going to count, why waste the time in that cold December morning or evening to go vote? Kind of kind of makes sense to me. And of course, the Electoral College's failure to accurately reflect the national popular will of the people. That has been something that's been debated since the day this was enacted under Article 2, Section 1 of the United States Constitution. Arguments in support of the Electoral College include the fact that it contributes to the cohesiveness of the country by requiring a distribution of popular support to be elected president. It spreads out the need, or makes necessary the need, to campaign in every state at some level. Taking your time, your energy, your money into states like Iowa, Wyoming, Idaho, the Dakotas, etc. They don't have a lot of Electoral College votes, but those small states together can team up for or against somebody and really put the hammer down. The Electoral College seems to enhance the status of minority interests. Special interest groups or minority interests, whether it's ethnic, sexual orientation, whatever, can come into these smaller states and really have an influence on the outcome of the elections. Supporters also say that it contributes to the political stability of the nation by encouraging a 2- or 3-party system. I'm not sure how I feel about that, actually, because I don't know that the Electoral College really plays into the preservation of the 2- or 3-party system. I think that it's extremely important that we have a multi-party system, but I think that the Electoral College may actually inhibit that at some level. So I'm not real sure that I agree with that argument. But overall, you really need to think about what you think is right when you start responding to the polls that are bound to be coming to you via telephone. Any questions, hit my email or leave a message here. I will get you the information as quickly as I can, as accurately as I can, and be as unbiased as I possibly can. Something that I really want to point out and have you think about is the fact that 10 states in this nation control 51% of the vote. Those 10 states are California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Georgia, and North Carolina. Those 10 states, if we go back to the popular vote only, eliminating the Electoral College, those 10 states control 51% of the eligible voters in the United States of America. That's a little bit crazy, don't you think? That 10 states could determine the outcome for the other 40 states and the territories that we have. Just something to think about. For now, that's it. Y'all have a great day. Bye.